Welcome everybody to the launch of the high-level panel on the ocean report for the Western Hemisphere here. It is a great pleasure to have you join us wherever you are in the world. My name's Andrew Steer. I'm the President and CEO of the World Resources Institute. It is a great honor to co-host this event with the embassies of Norway, Australia, Canada, Chile, Jamaica, and Mexico. It's also a great honor to work with the ambassadors here in Washington, D.C. Ambassador of Norway, Anniken Krutnes, Ambassador of Canada, Kristin Hillman, Ambassador of Chile, Alfonso Silva Navarro, Ambassador of Jamaica, Audrey Marks, Ambassador of Mexico, Martha Barcena. It's also a great honor today to welcome Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. Senator Whitehouse has been the co-chair of the Ocean Caucus in the Senate. We deeply appreciate your leadership on the ocean, Senator, also on climate change, and we appreciate your leadership over the last week during these difficult times. We are so grateful to you. Look, the ocean is rising literally and figuratively. And over the last year and a half, the high-level panel has been working very hard indeed to come out with some commitments for this decisive decade. This decade is the decade of ocean science. We know more about the surface of the moon than we know about the ocean. That needs to change. Ocean science accounts for only 4% of total research on natural resources. But this is a decade for the ocean in many ways. We need to rebound from the worst economic crisis in our history. And the high-level panel of the ocean has figured out just what an important role the ocean can play. Every single dollar invested in ocean activities generates $5 in return. It's also a decade in which we need once and for all to turn the corner on climate change. The high-level panel team has estimated that actually, in addition to absorbing all the carbon that it is today, it's already helping enormously, but 20% of everything more that needs to be done could be done with smart policies relating to the ocean. And this, of course, is the decade in which the Sustainable Development Goals need to be implemented. Now, of course, one of them is SDG 14, life below water, but actually the ocean plays a role in many of the SDGs, whether it's SDG 2 on net hunger. The high-level panel concluded that the ocean could provide 6 times as much food as it does today. SDG 10, for example, on reducing inequalities, the ocean can play a huge role in that. So today we are launching in the US the high-level panel findings. And I'd like now just to sort of remind you of what we're going to be doing in the coming 90 minutes. It's my pleasure to hand over just a minute to Ambassador Anniken Krutnes of Norway. Then we want to welcome Vidar Helgesen, who has really spearheaded much of this work. He was the former Ocean Panel Sherpa, and he's now in charge of the Nobel Council. Thank you, Vidar, for your incredible leadership. We're then honored to have Senator Sheldon Whitehouse give a keynote address, and Jane Lubchenco, who has been the co-chair of the Ocean Panel Expert Group. And then we're going to have a panel discussion. My colleague, Craig Hansen, who is the Vice President for Food, Forest, Water, and the Ocean at the World Resources Institute, is going to lead us in that. And we're going to be closed out by Ambassador Martha Barcena of Mexico. With that, it is my great honor to introduce the Ambassador of Norway, a great expert on the Arctic and ocean issues and security issues. So over to you, Ambassador. Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Pleasure to be here. Senator Whitehouse, fellow co-hosts, all participants, friends of the ocean. It's a great pleasure to be here today, and thank you to the World Resource Institute for arranging this seminar. All of us suffer a bit from COVID fatigue these days, and including Zoom fatigue. But this event is a proof that we have become much more sophisticated in our use of digital gatherings than we were a year ago. And I think the professionality of the World Resource Institute in managing this event gives us the idea that this will be actually a very, very fruitful and interesting event. So I'm looking forward to it. Together with 13 other heads of government and in collaboration with the UN, Norway's Prime Minister Erna Solberg initiated the establishment of the high-level panel on a sustainable ocean economy in 2018. The ambition was bold: to take a global position of leadership on all things ocean-related. The ocean faces multiple human-made threats, from climate change to ocean acidification, from overfishing to marine pollution. On top of this, the global population is growing. The world needs more and more resources and services from the ocean. Given those demands, a clean and healthy ocean is crucial for meeting the world's most vital needs and for achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals. The 14 leaders of the Ocean Panel set out to shape a transformative agenda for a sustainable ocean economy, where effective protection, sustainable production, and equitable prosperity would go hand in hand. More than 230 world-leading experts have provided the panel with new science, knowledge, and opportunities for action. The report sums up the abundant evidence of the benefits of ocean action for people, nature, and the economy. Based on this report, the high-level panel have agreed on new action agenda for a sustainable ocean economy, an agenda in which ocean protection, production, and prosperity go hand in hand. It's a call for a transformation in how we manage the ocean. At the forefront is the commitment to sustainably manage 100% of our national ocean territories by 2025. And the panel urges other coastal and ocean states to join this effort so that all ocean areas under national jurisdiction be sustainably managed by 2030. The agenda is certainly ambitious, and it will take us toward the transformations that we need to build a sustainable ocean economy. The pressure on the oceans are intense and growing, but we know that recovery is possible. A healthy ocean holds the solution to many of the world's challenges, and together we can make the transformation happen. Let me just give a few examples on how Norway will respond to this. Norway gives high priority to ocean-related science, ocean-related industries, and sustainable ocean management. We are committed to advancing the ocean agenda with our partners. The Ocean Panel will continue, and it will expand to a broader partnership with countries and other actors that commit to its action agenda. Norway's ocean management plans have served as a model for the Ocean Panel's work. For many years, Norway has developed holistic, sustainable management plans for our oceans. All sectors collaborate in these plans: fisheries, oil and gas, tourism, conservation interests. These are holistic plans, and the plans are to be further refined, leading up to the next update in 2024. The Ocean Panel's research and conclusions establish important guiding principles for these efforts. This spring, the government will submit a white paper on marine protected areas as part of Norway's integrated ocean management regimen. Last year, the government passed the Offshore Energy Act, opening up offshore areas for renewable energy production in Norway. The government is supporting a demonstration project for carbon capture and storage. We are drawing up a new roadmap for hydrogen as an environmentally friendly energy carrier, and we will facilitate extraction of minerals from the seabed. Norway will implement measures to cut greenhouse gas emissions from domestic shipping and fisheries by half by 2030. Norway is a global leader in efforts to promote clean seas and oceans free of hazardous substances. We are spearheading the effort to develop a global arrangement on the prevention of marine litter and microplastics. Norway also provides more than $6 million to help countries in the work for sustainable ocean economy. Through the World Bank, Norway provides support for mapping the potential for offshore wind power in developing countries and the development of energy storage technologies. We are also promoting an international agreement against marine pollution through the UN Environmental Assembly. Increased production of seafood can provide more than enough climate-friendly protein to a growing population. Offshore wind can provide a lot of electricity that the world needs. Blue vegetation can give us food, raw material, and fuel, while at the same time slowing climate change. Summing up, we have big tasks in front of us. We must stop the destruction of the ocean. We must produce more in the ocean and from it. We must strengthen our knowledge about the ocean and share that knowledge. And we must secure financing and investment in a sustainable ocean economy. These tasks are challenging, but necessary, and we can do it. Let me now give the floor to Vidar Helgesen. He was the former Minister of Climate and Environment in Norway, and until recently, Norway's representative to the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy. He is now the Executive Director of the Nobel Foundation. It's a great pleasure to give the floor to my fellow countryman, Vidar Helgesen. Thank you.
Thank you, Anniken, and let me start by saying that I'm delighted to be present at the US launch and the Western Hemisphere launch of the high-level panel's report. And I think despite all the challenges in the US right now, it's really a good timing, because the leadership of the 14 world leaders on the panel is not exclusive. They want other leaders to join in. And I think at this moment, there is every opportunity for an incoming US administration to be part of that leadership, and for ocean champions like Senator Whitehouse to be even more effective in your incredible work for the ocean, for climate, and for sustainability. Let me say a few things about the key features of the panel. You may ask, you saw the map that the ambassador presented. You may ask, 14 heads of state and government. That's not really that many. But actually, our countries do represent nearly 30% of the world's exclusive economic zones and nearly 40% of the world's coastlines. So it's a group of global significance for the ocean. I'd also like to highlight that we have really driven this as a science policy exercise. The US has not been a member of the panel, but the expert group has been co-chaired by Jane Lubchenco, who we'll hear from later. And more than 250 experts from around the world have presented the 14 leaders with the latest ocean knowledge that they have made use of to shape policies. We've also had a process inclusive of a range of other stakeholders, international organizations, NGOs, businesses, foundations, and these are also with us, and I'll come back to that when it comes to the action part. We worked on a premise that we need to build ocean wealth on ocean health, and we're not stopping here. We're eager to see knowledge-based policies that we've shaped transformed into action. And given that these are 14 heads of state, sitting and serving heads of state and government, they're not only presenting recommendations to the world, they're actually taking on commitments. The starting point for the panel was an agenda to protect effectively, produce sustainably, and prosper equitably. At the outset, this protection, production, prosperity agenda was much of a motto for the work, but we've been really happy to see that it's much more than that. This is substantially possible, and our experts have demonstrated that this agenda is manageable and doable. And let me point to a couple of points that actually Andrew already mentioned. On climate, we're seeing that more ocean business, the right ocean business, can actually produce more results that will take us to the Paris Agreement goals, 20% of the emission reduction that the world needs. And I've been happy to see that the report underpinning this has also inspired the Ocean-Based Climate Solutions Act that has been introduced in the US Congress recently. We're seeing the potential of increased seafood, which is not only good for coastal communities and the economies, but also good for human health and good for planetary health, because we can't expand agricultural frontiers to produce the protein that a growing population needs. We really need to capitalize more on the opportunities that do exist for sustainable food production in the ocean. And not least, the immense potential on renewable energy that we'll hear more about from Ørsted later. So there are opportunities, but these opportunities can only be captured if we manage this holistically. We need to govern and manage across silos in government, and businesses also need to act and collaborate across sectors. And that's why the headline commitment of the panel is really about the holistic approach. What the Ocean Panel leaders commit to is to sustainably manage 100% of their ocean territories, the ocean area under national jurisdiction, develop sustainable ocean plans, and put them in place by 2025. That is not only a loose recommendation, it's a commitment on the part of those 14 leaders covering 30% of the world's EEZs. And alongside that commitment comes an appeal to other coastal and ocean states to join in this commitment, so that by 2030, all oceans and coastal states will have put in place sustainable management frameworks for the ocean to serve the Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, obviously, this holistic approach doesn't preclude dealing in sectors and dealing with parts. The whole consists of parts, and we are proposing transformations in 5 core areas, and you can see them here. The first area I'll focus on is ocean wealth. There are tremendous opportunities for increasing economic activity in the ocean and from the ocean. We've mentioned food, the potential for more renewable energy, sustainable tourism, green shipping and transport. Enormous opportunities that can be harnessed and that can serve both the economy and the planet if done rightly. One important word here is on the issue of seabed mining, where we do see that there are opportunities for sustainable use, but where we're also saying that we really need to be have a precautionary approach to this in order to make sure that we don't harm the environment and undercut opportunities for future growth through short-term measures and irresponsible practices. Ocean health is obviously the prerequisite for building that ocean wealth. That goes for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It goes for protecting and restoring marine and coastal ecosystems and reducing pollution. The ambassador mentioned plastics, but no less important is actually to reduce nutrient pollution, runoffs from agriculture and industries and sewage, because the creation of dead zones in the ocean intermixes with the temperature rises in the ocean and is contributing to accelerating deoxygenization of the ocean. So a big agenda to restore ocean health that needs to be addressed. The panel also highlights ocean equity, and this is somewhat of a novelty. Not many address this crucial issue, which goes both for economic justice, that coastal people around the world need to be able to capitalize on the ocean wealth and to share equitably in that. It's also about human rights. many ocean industries have considerable human rights challenges, not least abuses in their supply chains, and that's an issue that really merits attention going forward. Which leads naturally to ocean knowledge. We need both to build knowledge among the general public about the importance of the ocean, among decision makers. Many countries are considerable ocean countries, but kind of have their backs to the sea. So we need more knowledge about the ocean. And that includes knowledge about the value of the ocean. One of the recommendations or proposals or actions from the panel is to account for the true value of the ocean, natural capital-based accounting for the ocean, which is needed if we are to really get a grip on how we can responsibly produce. And not least, harnessing ocean science. We have just commenced the UN Decade for Ocean Science, and new technologies provide us with immense opportunities of creating and sharing more data, and data is fundamental for the good planning and holistic planning that we are advocating as a panel. Finally, ocean finance. Again, public finance is important. Public finance also to de-risk private investment, but not least, governments need to see that proper ocean planning, proper governance and management frameworks are essential in order to attract private investment into a sustainable ocean economy, and the report provides ample evidence that this is doable. The panel is now moving on to the action agenda. The 14 leaders continue their engagement and they want others to join them. The commitment is being translated to country and regional action, putting in place sustainable ocean plans. Fiji has, for example, amassed a group of Pacific nations with a commitment to 100% ocean management and 30% protection, which is also something the panel advocates. Mexico has taken regional action. We'll probably hear more about that later from the ambassador. And we're seeing fantastic responses from business, finance, civil society in action coalitions that have responded to the call for action from the program. I will not go into all of these action coalitions. We have Ben Sykes, who's done a tremendous work together with his colleagues in Equinor and others on the Renewable Energy Coalition. We have an ocean data coalition where Microsoft is one of the leading partners. But I'll dwell for a minute on the Sustainable Ocean Plans Coalition, because that's where, as governments, we take ownership, and where the World Bank, the International Oceanographic Commission, and other partners are teaming up to provide support for governments that need financial and technical and advisory support in getting these planning processes going. We're now working to flesh out between the members of the panel and key stakeholders common and shared approaches to sustainable ocean plans, standards or criteria for ocean plans. And that work has a trajectory towards the UN Ocean Conference that will hopefully take place later this year. So all of this underpins what is really the key message of the panel. Give it 100%. The ocean gives us so much, as Prime Minister Trudeau of Canada said it. So we need to give it 100%. And we want, with that message, to also highlight again that others are invited to join in this effort. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vidar. And thank you for your leadership, Vidar, during this whole entire process. Much thanks to you. It's been a pleasure working with you, and thank you to your government, all the other governments that have been part of the Ocean Panel. This really is a landmark set of transformations and recommendations, setting the agenda for the next decade. So thank you very much, Vidar. You'll be back soon, audience. Vidar will be back, will be part of the panel, so you can ask him some questions. It's my pleasure now to bring to the virtual podium Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, U.S. Senator from Rhode Island, which appropriately is known as the Ocean State. And accordingly, Senator Whitehouse is co-chair of the U.S. Senate Oceans Caucus. Senator, we'd love to hear from you and your perspectives on the ocean, the high-level panel, and next steps for the United States. Senator, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you so much. It's good to be with everyone. And I want to reassure you that things will turn out fine in Washington. Indeed, the excesses of the Trump mob have, I think, set back their cause considerably rather than advanced it. And you saw that in the form of a first phalanx of Republicans who are willing to vote to impeach President Trump. We'll see whether that vote increases in the next few days when we get to the Senate. So don't worry about us. Andrew, thank you very much, and WRI for your leadership. Thank you to all the ambassadors. Thank you particularly to Norway for the Oslo Oceans Conference and for your leadership on this issue. And a welcome to my wonderful friend, Jane Lubchenco, who will be on the panel later on. What's happening politically in the United States? Well, the first thing that's happening politically is that climate has had a huge boost with the Senate victories in Georgia. Mitch McConnell, the darling of the fossil fuel donors, is no longer in a position to block climate legislation from coming to the floor. He not only sheltered the fossil fuel industry by blocking that legislation, but he also sheltered the deniers and obstructors in his caucus from having to face a division among Republicans, because there are probably a dozen or more Republican senators who would vote for a good climate bill. So this gives us the chance to move forward. It is really important. It's a terrific sign. Our friend John Kerry taking on the overseas mandate on climate for President-elect Biden is also a wonderful sign. There's nobody more passionate, well-known, and competent on this issue than John Kerry. He started the Oceans Conference as Secretary of State, so he's really strong. And this is a parochial matter, but my governor, Gina Raimondo, is going to be the Secretary of Oceans and Commerce. It's actually called Secretary of Commerce, but I call it Secretary of Oceans and Commerce because that's where the oceans portfolio rests in the United States government. And she's going to be very strong on that issue. Corporate America has just lost its excuse to do nothing on climate. And corporate America's dirty little secret is that for years, while they had good policies and good, in some cases, good supply chain efforts and good websites, when corporate America came to Congress, it completely abandoned climate change as an issue. Worse, some of its major trade associations were my most hostile enemies on anything having to do with major climate legislation. So the net presence of corporate America in Congress has been deeply anti-climate, even the good guys. And the excuse, the only credible excuse has been, well, what's the point? We'll make enemies and Mitch McConnell won't let the bill come to the floor anyway. Well, that excuse just evaporated. And we now have a president who's in a position to rally and galvanize corporate America to actually show up on this issue and to point out and expose the continued mischief of the fossil fuel industry through all of its various front groups and through its apparatus to try to obstruct action. So if we do this right, we're in an extraordinarily strong position on climate, and the public wants it. It will be, I believe, bipartisan. So I'm filled with optimism about that, assuming we play our hand well. We've got a winning hand. We just can't be stupid about it. Recently, we've seen a lot of good activity in the Senate on the oceans. In the latest defense bill, we got much more military attention to pirate fishing overseas to support the efforts to track and disable the pirate fishing fleet. We extended the Navy renewable fuels program. Those were two important victories. Separately, we got not only an improved plan on ocean plastics, but we got a $75 million fund on ocean plastics. So America will be back on ocean plastics and won't have an empty pocketbook joining the rest of the world community on trying to clean up the plastics in our seas. And we extended for the first time tax benefits for wind offshore energy. Very important around my state, very important to our clean energy future, but wind energy lagged because of siting problems. So we gave them an extra 5 years to catch up with onshore. We had some near misses that are disappointments, but are things to look forward to in the next Congress, particularly a Democrat-controlled Congress. an offshore bill to bring revenues from offshore to coastal states to help us prepare for sea level rise and storm surge. The Blue Globe bill to dramatically improve our ocean data collection, and the Blue Carbon bill to support the oceans in their ability to sequester carbon, particularly around reefs and mangroves and things like that. These were actually close calls, so the prospect for getting them done in the coming Congress is actually quite good. And everything that I've just described, all of that legislation is bipartisan. And so we're operating on a very strong bipartisan foundation in Congress on oceans work. And there's room for, I think, real enthusiasm about the United States coming back into the world community, not only as a follower, but as a leader on both climate change and on cleaning up our besmirched oceans. So thank you all for the great work that you're doing. I apologize for our 4-year absence, and but I hope you will welcome us back despite our misbehavior during that period. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Wow, what a vision of hope here. I think everyone listening in should be energized by your vision here of optimism, and the next 4 years should be pretty exciting for movement in the United States, as well as the leadership. Hopefully the U.S. also can reemerge and engage in the world as well. So thank you for your work, Senator.
If there's one thing I could add, it's that the countries that are participating here could put more pressure on the international corporate community to call out the American corporations that are doing nothing on climate, and particularly the fossil fuel corporations that continue to secretly fund climate denial and climate opposition. There's no reason for the foreign subsidiaries of the American fossil fuel industry not to say to their American cohort, hey, knock it off, you idiots. You're doing us a lot of harm, both environmentally and reputationally.
Thank you, Senator. So audience, you now have your task directly from the words from a senator. Go forth and let's build a more prosperous world for a more prosperous ocean. So thank you, Senator, and thank you for all the leadership you do, and best of luck, not only this week in the next 10 days, but the next 4 years on the ocean agenda.
Thank you.
Next, it's my distinct pleasure to invite to the virtual floor Dr. Jane Lubchenco. Dr. Lubchenco is the co-chair of the expert group of the Ocean Panel and is also a University Distinguished Fellow at Oregon State University. Jane's going to share with us some findings of the Ocean Solutions Report. So Jane, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Craig. Senator Whitehouse, ambassadors, what a treat it is to be here today. This is so exciting. This is just a very special moment in time where the forces are converging, and I believe will result in some very exciting new future opportunities that we desperately need. My role here today is to share with you some of what has been done from the framing that was set up by the Ocean Panel to look first to knowledge from scientists and other experts, and then to draw on that knowledge to create new policies and new action. To do that, the Ocean Panel convened a group of experts and invited a series of 20 different reports on a range of different topics that they were interested in. Each of those 20 reports was peer-reviewed, and there were over 250 experts from around the world providing the knowledge that said, here's what we know, here are the challenges, here are opportunities for action. And so they teed up for the Ocean Panel itself opportunities for meeting current global challenges. Those 20 reports led directly to the report that's depicted here, entitled Ocean Solutions that Benefit People, Nature, and the Economy. This report draws on knowledge around the world and really provides practical, science-based solutions that identify the way forward. That report in turn was offered to the Ocean Panel, and based on that, based on all the deliberations, all the consultations, all of the discussions over a couple of years period of time, resulted in the final document that was issued by the panel itself, this transformations document that is truly an action agenda. It's a call, it's a set of commitments, it's a call to action from other countries around the world, and not just governments, but also private sector, financial institutions, civil society, etc. So this is a rallying cry. Next slide, please. This report that really draws it all together is quite comprehensive. It delivers a number of key messages. First and foremost, that the health, wealth, and well-being of the entire world and its people is dependent on the ocean. The ocean is central to our future. The potential is enormous, but there are major challenges, and it illustrates how to overcome some of those challenges, how to create a new relationship with the ocean, a relationship that, as Vidar highlighted, is balanced. The challenges are great without any doubt, but they're not insurmountable. There are very practical things that we can do. I think one way to really encapsulate all of this, it's a huge long report, but one way to really bring it all together is to say that it provides a new narrative for the ocean. And that new narrative says, the ocean we now know is not too big to fail. We're seeing problems everywhere. It's also not too big to fix. There are ways forward. There are a lot of things that are happening that just need to be accelerated, scaled up, and copied. What we have learned is that the ocean is too big and too central to our future, to the planet's future, to ignore. Next slide, please. The report draws attention to the key role of basic building blocks that are needed to achieve this new narrative for the ocean. Science-based data, goal-oriented ocean planning, a central exciting new feature, tools to de-risk finance and use innovation. In short, rethinking ocean accounting so that it reflects the true value of the ocean. So in short, the Ocean Panel invited scientists and other experts to synthesize knowledge, to highlight opportunities for action. And in turn, the Ocean Panel has charted a truly exciting, ambitious, but feasible agenda for action. Now the real work begins, and this is an exciting moment for us to share what the panel did and what the opportunities are coming up. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Great summary. Everyone, you can access the ocean report as well as the ocean transformations that Vidar talked about at oceanpanel.org. Just go to oceanpanel.org. Both reports are there, and with a lot of other information as well, as including a video from the 14 heads of government that comprise the Ocean Panel. So thank you very much, Jane, for this and for your leadership of the expert group. It was probably no easy task corralling hundreds of scientists to come together to create such a major body of work. A lot of it actually ended up being published in Nature. So kudos to you and that team. Audience, we're going to turn things over now to a panel discussion. So I'm going to invite up to the virtual stage and bring back Vidar. Vidar, welcome back to the virtual stage. The Norway's representative of the high-level panel, as well as Vidar, you used to wear a hat within Norway as Environment Minister. So I'd love to get your perspectives going forward from that as well. Jane will be on this panel. Jane, many of you might know, was basically directed the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, for many years, one of the greatest leaders of NOAA in the US history. So Jane, it's an honor to have you here on the virtual stage. Let me bring up as well, Karen Kemper. Many of us in the audience might know Karen quite well. She is the Global Director for the Environment, Natural Resources, and Blue Economy Global Practice at the World Bank. So welcome to the virtual stage, Karen. The World Bank, clearly an important player on the ocean agenda, especially going forward and helping nations bring about that vision that Vidar and Jane have laid out. And finally, up to the stage, I want to invite Benj Sykes. Benj is the Head of Market Development, Consenting and Extending External Affairs of UK Offshore at Ørsted, a major energy company, perhaps the largest company when it comes to offshore wind energy. So I'm going to bring everyone virtual stage. Hopefully we can get it such that the audience can see all four panelists. I'm Craig Hansen. I'm Vice President for Food, Forests, Water and the Ocean at the World Resources Institute, and I will be the moderator for today's discussion. During this session, just let you know, there is a Q&A box on your Zoom screen. If you can look in the bottom, in the center, there's a Q&A box there. Feel free to type in questions. They can be a general question. If you have a question for a particular panelist, please let us know. We'll be gathering those. And at about 10 minutes or so after the hour, we will turn over to Q&A where I will take those questions and pose them to the panelists. So now's your time to have that burning question that now that we've been in this conversation for 45 minutes, you've got this burning question you'd like to ask, and now's your chance. Just type it there in the Q&A session. So let's get on. I'd like to kickstart a little bit of discussion here with our panelists. And I'd like to start with those we haven't yet heard from, both Karen and Benj. In particular, I'd like to understand how your institution is responding to the Ocean Panel's recommendations. Karen, let me start with you, please.
Thank you, Craig. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, let me say that it's a great pleasure and honor to be at this US launch of the Ocean Panel work. And I'd like to thank the embassies of Norway, Australia, Canada, Chile, and Mexico, and of course, WRI for inviting me. The World Bank has participated in a number of forums in the Ocean Panel work. Many of you know Mari Pangestu, who's our managing director and who was co-chair of the expert panel. And we have also had the pleasure of participating in the advisory panel. So we've been very closely following the work of the panel and find that it is the most innovative and comprehensive work around oceans that has ever been done in this space. And we specifically like the holistic way that the panel is looking at things, and we saw the presentation by Vidar, but I'd also particularly like to highlight the equity question that Vidar talked about, because of course from the World Bank perspective, we are in the business of alleviating extreme poverty and helping bring about shared prosperity for people. So looking at the equity question of how we use the ocean and how we manage the ocean is actually very important also in the development point of view. But the key thing I'd like to talk about is our strong honor and pleasure to be one of the key agencies leading the follow-up on the integrated ocean management plans. And actually, specifically with the support of Norway and Canada in the follow-up, we will be able to support countries through our ProBlue Trust Fund to kickstart their work on the integrated ocean management plans. And we already have gotten a few questions about it, on how to go about it. So we are super excited to do that and support, and to work with other partners in doing that, including WRI and IOC. So that is where we stand. Very great work.
Great, thanks, Karen. Now, Benj,
Thanks, Craig, and thanks for the introduction. Thanks everyone who's spoken so far, and good morning to those of you in the US and afternoon if you're elsewhere. So Ørsted, we are a global clean energy company headquartered in Denmark, I should say, but with a footprint right across the globe, including in a number of states in the US, which is very exciting for us. What are we doing? Well, I guess we've transformed ourselves. 10 years ago, we were an oil and gas company. We've heard the Senator speak about oil and gas companies. In fact, I used to work for one of them. And we've made this huge transition from black to green. We've gone from a business producing oil and gas to a business that's creating a world that runs entirely on green energy. And how are we doing that? We are the world leaders in offshore wind. So our focus in terms of how are we responding to the Ocean Panel's recommendations, we're getting out there investing billions of dollars to build offshore wind, currently principally in Northern Europe, but also now we're constructing in Southeast Asia. And of course, we've got the US's first offshore wind farm in the Senator's state, which is very exciting for us as well. And we're gearing up to build more. So I'll talk a little bit later about some of the specific actions, but I think our response is to say, okay, we happen to be world leaders in this technology. This technology is going to transform not only where we get our electricity from, but also it's going to transform coastal communities. It's going to drive clean air. We're talking about investing across the globe something like $3 trillion in offshore wind. That's a lot of money, but bear in mind that by doing that, we reduce the cost of air pollution on human health by $2 trillion. So pretty good net saving there. I'll talk more about it later, but I think, I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the transformational work that we've learned around how to coexist with fishing, how to work meaningfully with other communities that use the sea so that we can coexist and drive this sustainable ocean agenda together.
Great, thank you, Benj. Thank you, Benj. I'm going to turn now to Jane and Vidar. What are you most excited about when it comes to the Ocean Panel's recommendations, the transformations? What excites you most? Jane?
I would highlight the headline commitment that the Ocean Panel has made, which specifically says that the 14 countries have committed to sustainably managing 100% of their waters using a sustainable ocean plan by 2025. Now, that's easy to say. It's really hard to do, but it would be truly transformative for some of the reasons that Benj has just highlighted. To date, much of the ocean activity has been sector by sector, issue by issue. Requiring sustainable management of the whole thing means you have to consider how those sectors interact with one another, how we can use the ocean without using it up. And so creating a sustainable ocean plan to think about the possibilities, listen to all voices, draw on the data that are available, and have the goal of deconflicting uses, but achieving a sustainable and healthy ocean ecosystem that provides all of the benefits that we want is just an incredible opportunity. And this is what the World Bank is so excited about, and for good reason. It's what the countries are excited about. And I think that this is going to be just a transformative outcome. Going to be really hard, but there's huge enthusiasm around it.
Thank you, Jane. Vidar, I know this might be a bit like asking you to pick a favorite child, given your role in the transformations, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What excites you most about the transformations?
In that case, Jane and I share a child, because my favorite is also the 100% commitment. Because it's simply what is needed. I mean, we know that governments tend to be compartmentalized, businesses tend to be that, even science tend to be compartmentalized, but the ocean isn't. The ocean, the impacts, human impacts on the ocean are interrelated. The environmental challenges as well as the industrial activities, and that's why we need to take that 100% approach. And happy with it because we've gotten 14 world leaders to commit to it. And it's something quite easy to understand, but very difficult to do. But we've also got a number of actors lined up behind this, which makes me hopeful that we'll be able to see this through. And we have some here, but I'd like to quote from an op-ed I read yesterday from Ingrid van Wies, Vice President of the Asian Development Bank, and John Tanser, WWF International Lead on the Oceans, who said, the commitments of the Ocean Panel should be heard as the starter's pistol for every other world leader. And I think that's quite a good stamp of approval on what we've come up with, and should inspire others to join in.
Great, thank you, Vidar. I'm going to turn now to all of you. Since this is a U.S. launch, and we just heard from Senator Whitehouse, what do you foresee as the most important things the United States could do to advance the transformations? Let me start with you, Jane.
There are so many options for the U.S. to be engaged in this space. Being a player, being engaged with other countries is an obvious thing Senator Whitehouse noted. But I would focus on two things. One is the opportunity to really pursue this ocean climate nexus. It's crystal clear that the Biden-Harris administration is taking climate change very seriously. And to have that agenda be enabled by a focus on ocean-based opportunities for mitigation is huge. We've seen from the work of the Ocean Panel that as much as 20% of the emission reductions that are needed to get us to the 1.5 degree target by 2050, the Paris Agreement, could be provided by ocean-based activities. That's renewable energy, like what Benj was talking about, but it also means decarbonizing shipping, and it means paying attention to nature-based solutions like blue carbon ecosystems of coral reefs, mangroves, seagrass beds. So there's huge opportunity in the ocean climate nexus space that seem to be very great fit for embracement by the new administration and the new Congress. And I think there's huge potential in that space. I would also highlight, though, the earlier 100% commitment that we just talked about, because the US already has started down that path with regional ocean plans that could be expanded to national waters. So two big opportunities that I see.
Great, thank you, Jane. Vidar.
I certainly don't disagree with Jane. I would say, you mentioned climate change. Obviously, the person of John Kerry is not only a climate action champion, he's also a big ocean champion. And I think it seems natural that that angle would be a very good fit for the US administration. And then obviously, as I come from a country that is has a very strong transatlantic orientation and knows what US leadership means in so many areas of politics and international affairs, I just think that the US getting back on the world scene as a leader in all these areas, and with such strong commitments coming out of the new administration voices, I have high hopes that that will be potentially transformative. And there's no way there's nothing in what the Ocean Panel has come up with that I don't see as a great fit for the signals coming out of the Biden administration.
Great, thank you, Vidar. Karen, your perspectives.
Well, as was just touched on by Jane, the US has been leading the way in some key aspects of sustainable ocean management, and including through approaches on national integrated coastal zone management, focus on marine spatial planning, and then particularly the pilot offshore energy generation, but also sustainable fisheries. and more with a strong political will to tackle the issue of marine plastics. And we heard from the senator of how this is now continuing to move. These are things where we think that the US can provide an excellent example for those countries that want to embark on this, including in the integrated ocean management space. There are not too many countries that have already done that. So what we need to do is to join forces with everyone who has done it hands-on, both on the technical side, but also on the policy side and the political side, because these integrated ocean management plans and marine spatial planning, they are not just technical, they are a much bigger societal endeavor. And that experience that the US can bring to bear will be very interesting and very important. The US has been a partner in ProBlue, which is an international partnership that supports countries to do innovative things. And so we look very much forward to continue working very closely with the US in that framework and in others.
Thank you, Karen. Benj, your thoughts?
Thanks, Craig. It's always hard going forth because a lot has been said, but I guess I'll come with a slightly different perspective as a business that's investing and wanting to invest in delivering these sustainable ocean economies that we've talked about. And I think, there's no getting away from the fact that the US has been a difficult place to progress our business, particularly offshore wind. The permitting process has kind of stalled, as Senator Whitehouse knows only too well. So I think getting that kick-started very quickly, next Wednesday marks a really important turning point for the whole low carbon space, because it unlocks a huge potential of one of the biggest, most economically powerful forces in the world, the US. So I think we just got to get our skates on and get after it right now. There's the whole permitting process. I think what I'd look for is for the administration to both be ambitious, showing leadership, not just in the US, but globally, but also learning. And I think I'll talk a little bit later about some of the things that it would be really great for the US not to do, that we've learned from our own bitter experience in other parts of the world where we've been moving a little bit quicker. But I think fundamentally this is about, let's get on with it now. So the biggest thing we can do is start moving, start investing, get that $3 trillion going into the sea.
Great, thank you. And thank you all for your perspectives there. Hopefully the Senator heard all of our thoughts and is taking it back to the Senate caucus. My next question is about success factors. I'm curious, what are critical success factors for ensuring that the transformations become mainstream, right? Adopted by countries beyond the ocean panel nations, embedded in finance, pursued by the private sector. So what do you see as critical success factors for mainstreaming? Let me start this time with Vidar.
I think for the panel members to demonstrate that they live through on their commitments, that they start developing these plans and demonstrate the benefits of it. That's essential. There needs to be, we are aware that through this transformations document, we've created quite a lot of expectations. We were very happy with the reception that this has received politically, but also from experts around the world. But with that comes accountability for results, and that has to start with the panel countries themselves. Unless they deliver, others wouldn't be enticed to join in. But we will be commencing or progressing on this while having an open approach to inviting others to the table. If other countries share the 100% approach, we can really have a very constructive peer dialogue on how we can make progress. And I think that can be very powerful.
Thank you, Vidar. Jane.
Yeah, I certainly agree with Vidar, but I would also note that for the ambitions that have been expressed and the aspirations that have been created by the Ocean Panel, it will require much more than action by governments. No doubt governments have led it, they need to deliver for sure. But the true opportunity here is to bring together and be complementary actions from governments, from the private sector, from financial institutions like the World Bank and others, and from civil society, the NGOs. And there are huge opportunities across that space. So the action coalitions that have been created by the Ocean Panel, bringing together those different interest groups to really take an issue and move it forward, whether it is around the 100% commitment of sustainably managing an ocean space, whether it is ocean renewable energy, whether it is seafood, sustainable seafood from fisheries and aquaculture. Any one of those and the other action coalitions are really need to cut across the government, private sector, civil society, financial institutions nexus. And that will be truly transformative. We've seen over and over that success can breed success. So we have a hugely ambitious agenda. The next step is to really show some successes. And I would say some successes in governments delivering and some successes in the action coalitions really achieving something that's truly transformative. So in short, we have this idea, this hope that we can produce sustainably, protect effectively, and prosper equitably. But for all of that to come together, we need all of those players working together.
Great, thank you. Eloquently said, Jane. Thank you very much. Karen, critical success factors.
Well, it's hard to disagree with anything that has been said before. So let me just add something rather than repeating. And that is related to the current COVID crisis. There's a lot of stimulus money that is currently being spent on infrastructure projects, investments that countries are making in Europe, the European Union. Everybody is doing that. And one thing that would be pretty critical at this moment would be to put a blue lens on these recovery investments, because a lot of them are going to impact the oceans. So we have an incredibly important moment in time where we could shift investments now towards, say, renewable energy from the oceans, where we would look how investments that are made along the coastline, how they would impact, or rather not impact, the oceans, or doing that so in a beneficial manner. Of how we look at, for instance, waste management, which is usually not part of stimulus packages, but which can create a lot of jobs and which would keep the plastic and the marine litter out of the oceans. So I think part of the success for what the panel is saying starts today and would benefit from being built into the policies that are currently being developed as a response to the COVID economic downturn. I will leave it at that. And of course, in addition, I agree with everything that Jane and Vidar have said.
Great. Thank you, Karen. Benj.
Thanks, Craig. And yes, needless to say, I agree with all of my predecessing speakers. But turning to the specifics of how do we mainstream some of this work around ocean energy? I had the honor, thanks to Vidar, to pull together a coalition, a global industry coalition to work on offshore renewable energy. I think the link to our report is available in the chat. I'd urge you to go and look at that. There are some really important things in there about what it will take to scale up ocean renewable energy to get from where we are today. And then don't worry about the units, but we're at 30 gigawatts in the world today. We're looking to get to 1,400. that is a massive challenge, but it is a massive opportunity for governments in terms of creating economic activity. All the supply chains that are going to be happening, and again, the Senator will know very clearly what that means for coastal communities. We see in, for example, the UK, there's a small fishing town called Grimsby that has been transformed by offshore renewable energy industry. It's gone from a struggling town to one that's thriving with high quality jobs. So I think what we need to do is to mainstream this. We've got to get out and tell this story to coastal states, coastal governments around the world, and demonstrate that this is not only good for the oceans, not only good for the air, but it's also good for communities, it's good for people. And we can only deliver that if we work in partnership. You know, I spend a lot of my time working with the fishing communities in the United Kingdom, because we know we have to work together. Early and strategic partnerships with government, with interested parties, whether they're fishing industry, whether it is the shipping industry, whether it is the environmental protection agencies. It's working together and early that will unlock this and mainstream it.
Great, thank you, Benj, and thank you all for your great insights there and comments around the critical success factors. I have a final question for you before we turn to the broader Q&A. It's this: given everything that you've heard today, what most gives you hope about the ocean agenda for this decade? I'm going to start with you, Karen, this time. What gives you hope for the decade?
There's a number of things that do give me hope. One of them is the recognition that has really grown in the broader sense over the past years, and very much highlighted by the work of the panel, that the ocean is actually not an infinite resource, but it is finite. And that is, for many people who look at the big horizon, it didn't appear like that. So the fact that we are even talking about a proactive and effective management of this global resource does give me hope, because that is the first step on making changes in policies and in investments. The other thing that gives me hope is that is the commitments that countries are making towards ocean health and sustainable management, and to have 14 such important countries that are driving that and that are spearheading that. And that takes me to the third point, and that is we have seen at the World Bank increasing demand for sustainable blue economy approaches over the past years. And so I think there are two things that are coming together: the impetus that this panel work has given to countries and charting a way forward, and at the same time countries realizing that they can and need to do something about it and expressing those needs and what they want to do. So these three issues are what really gives me hope, because this is a great step forward compared to where we were just a while ago.
Great, thank you, Karen. Thank you. Great insights. Benj.
Yeah. So there are so many reasons to be excited and hopeful. It's hard to know where to start, but I'm going to start in a slightly odd place, which is the pandemic. Because if there's one thing positive that the pandemic has taught me, at least, and I think many of us, is that if we recognize the need to act and we recognize the urgency of action, boy, can we do some stuff as a global society, as a global community. We can really take on some of these seemingly intractable and unsolvable challenges. So I think we've shown ourselves that we can solve some massive problems in the world, and looking after the ocean and sustainable ocean development is one of those that we now know we can tackle. I think the other thing for me is, in my own little world of offshore renewable energy, we've shown what human innovation can deliver. You know, we've gone from being some little niche player to potentially, if we get this right, the backbone of the world's electricity system, but also driving clean air, regenerating coastal communities, all the things I've spoken about. So I think we've got massive reason for hope. And if I look at the other themes as well in the high-level panel's work, there are lots of good reasons why this is going to happen. We just have to get off our backsides and do it. And as I say, I think we've seen from the pandemic that if we choose to get off our backsides, we can do this stuff.
Great, thank you. Jane.
I think I would, I'm an ecologist, and so I think about things in a holistic fashion. But I guess I come back to the very real urgency that exists in the world right now. Climate change, the clock is ticking, things are getting worse and worse. We have to be making faster progress more effectively. The pandemic has really shined a spotlight on the challenges to our health systems, and with huge economic consequences. We see racial inequities and economic inequities globally. Those and other problems, the loss of biological diversity, we have so many problems that are happening. But that urgency can now be coupled with a sense of hope, because we see the interconnections across these different problems. And those interconnections are the way forward. In addressing climate change, we can also address equity and health and economic issues. These are not isolated things. And it's this holistic approach that the panel has brought to the lens of the ocean that gives me hope, because it illustrates, it draws on the existing successes we have already seen at a small scale and provides a pathway to regional and global successes in doing that integration. So it's a coupled message of urgency and hope together. And the fact that 14 heads of state are willing to act is huge. And that is going to be starting the avalanche. As long as they deliver, as long as they are held accountable, but it has already inspired other countries and other actors. That is very hopeful, and it's very exciting.
Thank you, Jane. And Vidar, your thoughts?
Thank you. I'll build on what Jane says, but I'll take a different angle, inspired obviously from where I stand now, which is as Executive Director of the Nobel Foundation. I'm really hopeful what we've seen from the science policy interface through this process. And that's relevant to the ocean, it's relevant to climate change, it's relevant to the pandemic, it's relevant to economic inequalities, biodiversity loss, whatever. The very close interaction between sitting and serving heads of state and government, commissioning science and research and expertise, getting that presented and building policy on it in a very dynamic process that really gives me hope. And we're seeing so much policy making around the world, building on nationalism or populism or lack of knowledge. What we have demonstrated here is it's doable, it's possible to do this. And not in a traditional way. There's also a lot of policy making taking place on the basis of knowledge. But the way we've done it here, in a very close proximity between good forces and with action as the ultimate objective, I think is really inspiring. And I think for also in terms of my work at the Nobel Foundation and Alfred Nobel's will saying that we need to act to the greatest benefits of humankind, we need more of this kind of interaction between science, policy, and action.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Vidar, and thank you all panelists for your reflections on these questions. I'm going to turn things over now to questions for the audience. So get ready. I'm going to, we've received quite a few questions. We won't be able to get through every single one of them, but we pull out a few here to stimulate some discussion. For these, I might point to a specific panelist to give comments. Not everyone needs to feel they need to answer every question. So we want to get through as many of these as we can. The first one here is for Benj. Congratulations on your recently launched artificial reefs at the Borssele wind farm. And question here around, could you elaborate on that success? And are you exploring things like growing seaweed at wind farms or other ways of building serving marine life?
So that's a really, really interesting question. I'll try and be brief, but I'm a bit nerdy on this. So It's an absolutely vital thing that we are doing, which is looking not just in Borssele, which is our first Dutch wind farm in the Dutch sector of the North Sea. Around the world, we're looking how can we create biodiversity gains and benefits where we build our wind farms. And Borssele is just one where, as part of the process of building a wind farm, you have to put in some biodiversity solutions. We'll be monitoring that. I'm happy to pick that up offline actually with the questioner. So I'm sure you can find out how to get in touch with me. Happy to talk about that. Really interesting projects we've been doing also though with sustainable fishing as well. And we've done a lot of work in one of our UK wind farms around how do we use the wind farms to encourage the right kind of biodiversity developments. We're doing oyster seeding, we're doing a lot of research that we're funding now into lobsters and crab development because they're important economically. So I think what I would just say is it's a really important area for our ocean renewable energy and others that develop activity, human activity in the sea, to do it in an ecologically sustainable way. And that means investing in science.
It brings up a good point too that the ocean panel talked about is breaking down the silos, right? You can bring energy production together with fisheries, together with conservation, et cetera, and we need to be more proactive at thinking about that. Yeah, so congratulations on that work and looking forward to see what comes next. I believe Norwegian Ambassador Krutnes also has some perspectives on wind. Ambassador, please join the conversation.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes, we can.
I'm told that somebody has stopped my video, so that's probably why you cannot see me.
We'll work on that. There you go. We can see you.
Yep, fine, thank you. No, I just wanted to comment a bit on wind energy. That is coming up in Norway as well, and I listened very carefully to Benj. I just wanted to say that we had some good news yesterday from the US. And the Norwegian company Equinor with the British Petroleum, BP, has been awarded the biggest ever offshore wind license outside the coast of New York, the state of New York. And the amount of power or energy that this will provide, the three licenses they have together, they will provide 3.3 gigawatts. And we heard Ben said that the total in the world today is 30 gigawatts. So we're talking adding a tenth of what we already have in the world. And I know that Equinor will work, of course, very, very closely with the local authorities. And this will also add an industry onshore, and it will create work for locals. It will add to a green economy. And I think that is something we've learned from our energy project back home, that you have to have, as we said so many times today, we have to have a holistic approach. And that goes also for wind energy. And I'm so happy to hear about Ben's projects for the ecosystem, for conserving the marine environment. And we also have to add and include all the people involved on land, in the business, in the local communities, and all this. But I just said this is a very good start for, or a continuation on the slowly coming up offshore wind energy in the US, and this will really, really add to the green energy in the US. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, and good news indeed, right, in terms of the scale of change here. Next question is for Vidar. This question actually comes from Roger Sant, a DBRI board member, friend of many of us who are participating in this event, and a great advocate, one of the world's greatest advocates for the sea. Vidar, Roger is asking, what about the high seas? We talked a lot today about EEZs. What about the high seas?
Yeah, it's a very important question, and it's not the first time I get it. Obviously, there is an international process, the BBNJ negotiations, taking place about the high seas, and the panel had its limits. So we didn't want to interfere with those negotiations, but clearly we're supportive of progress there. But then secondly, there's the point that around 90% of the biodiversity and resources globally exists within national jurisdiction. Most economic and human activity take place there. Most environmental pressures derive from those zones or on land. So we thought that with national leaders around the table, we should start with ensuring proper management of those ocean territories. And I think the next step from there is, once you have applied the 100% approach at home, you need to do that with your regional neighbors and regional seas. And building on that, you also will be in a better position to understand and take care of the high seas. But for a panel consisting of national leaders, we determined we would focus on the national waters.
Thank you, Vidar. Karen, there's a question that came through about how's all this going to be financed? Not that the World Bank has to finance all of it, but I'm curious your perspectives of how do we finance this transformation and transition to a sustainable ocean economy?
Well, that is actually a very interesting and good question. There is a role for public finance, and there is a huge role for private finance. I was earlier talking about the blue lens, for instance, on the stimulus money that is currently happening. And there, of course, there's a lot of public finance. And as I mentioned, a lot of that finance could be either routed a blue way, an oceans way, such as, for instance, funding that could go to waste management or could go to sustainable ways and nature-based solutions on coastal protection and all kinds of things that one could do. But there is a big role that also comes from the private sector. And that is where the incentives need to be created by political decision makers for the private sector to be able to engage. So the two sides do need to work together. At the World Bank, we are very committed to continue financing in the blue space, and we are also part of a group of multilateral development banks that look at the or have adopted the sustainable blue finance principles, so that what we do is to the benefit of the oceans, and we are charging ahead with that. But again, we do need to make the link to the private sector, and political decision makers also need to do that in order to enhance that financing. And I think we heard some examples from Benj on the energy side, but of course you have others in the hospitality industries, in fishing, and so on.
Great, thank you, Karen. And a final question for you, Jane. Several questions have come up around aquaculture, and sometimes aquaculture gets a bad rap, etc. I'm curious your perspectives, from your ecological perspective, from your role as being head of NOAA and from being the co-chair of the expert group. What's the future look like? Ocean Panel talks about the importance of mariculture going forward. What's the future look like? How do we ensure it is sustainable?
Fortunately, one of the very first blue papers that was commissioned by the Ocean Panel was entitled "The Future of Food from the Sea." And it was a stellar report that I recommend to anyone, either the original blue paper or the paper that was eventually published in the prestigious scientific journal Nature. And that report really shines a spotlight on the potential for having truly sustainable fisheries and sustainable aquaculture, with the clear message that it's not one versus the other. Both are needed, and there are good, well understood ways to make both of them sustainable. If we look to the potential for food from the ocean as being an even greater player than it is already today important, but an even greater player in providing food security for the future. It's clear that by stopping overfishing, recovering stocks that have been so depleted, and then it will be possible to fish them at a higher level be able to obtain more fish from the ocean through wild capture fisheries than is done today. So there is some potential to do that. But most of the potential for food from the sea is going to come from growth in aquaculture. But the greatest potential in that space is non-fed aquaculture. So the non-fed aquaculture are the things like bivalves, mussels, clams, oysters that filter water from the ocean. And there is opportunity in that space to produce much more protein than is currently needed, protein and healthy food, lots of important micronutrients. So there is huge potential. Yes, of course, it needs to be done in ways that are sustainable and appropriate. And we have good guidelines about what that looks like. So huge opportunity. I refer people to that report. And it's available on the oceanpanel.org website.
Great. Thank you, Jane. Thank you all the panelists. A virtual round of applause for all of our panelists for the discussion and for the Q&A. I'd like to turn now to our closing remarks. It's my pleasure and distinct honor to have on the virtual stage Ambassador Martha Barcena, Mexico's ambassador to the United States. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I was just turning on my video and my microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, on behalf of the Mexican government, it is an honor to address this audience. First of all, I would like to thank the speakers, Senator Whitehouse, Vidar Helgesen, Andrew Scheer, Jane Lubchenco. I remember I met Vidar Helgesen when he was minister in Norway, and I was a Mexican ambassador to Norway. All your participation was really excellent, magnificent. I like to thank all my colleagues, ambassadors that have been joining this seminar, this launching of the report of the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy, as well as the audience for taking the time to join us in this important event. All your questions were not only interesting, but very relevant. And Mexico, as most countries, has been severely affected by COVID-19. The recovery strategy for everyone's benefit must aim for long-term sustainability and to take a special care of the most vulnerable. And to achieve that, we believe that investing in a blue and sustainable economy is fundamental. This 2021, we cannot only begin to fix what COVID-19 did to the world and to our countries and economies, but also fix other ongoing and exacerbated challenges such as climate change, rising oceans, pollution, ecosystem collapse, economic instability, inequality and poverty, among others. We have seen that the 17 Sustainable Development Goals have been affected by COVID. They will be delayed, so we have to work harder to reach the Agenda 2030. The ocean is a life source. We, Mexico and Norway, know that very well. For centuries, we have been joined by the Gulf Stream, and the warm current of the Gulf Stream is, as I used to say jokingly, the export free of coast that Mexico sends to the Nordic countries, and that allow them not to be frozen during winter. The ocean sustains us with oxygen, food, medicine, culture. It stabilizes the climate and absorbs dangerous carbon emissions. It leads to greater prosperity, and it's the source of millions of jobs in fishing, tourism, transportation, and increasingly renewable energies. The ocean can be a source of well-being and hope, but only if it's healthy and well managed, as all of you have underlined. The launch of the Ocean Panel Transformations document represents a step forward toward this goal. We are proud to be part of the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy and are working hard to achieve the 100% sustainable ocean management. It is a huge risk, a huge challenge. It is a huge endeavor. For our country, promoting a sustainable ocean economy means, above all, prioritizing local vulnerable communities to ensure that the ocean continues to be a source of well-being. We are certain that the ocean must be a central part of any transformation where protection, production, and prosperity go hand in hand. And as an example of our commitment to implement the actions identified by the high-level panel to transit to a sustainable ocean economy, the government of Mexico formally announced its adhesion to the Global Ghost Year initiative on past November 11, 2020. With it, our country joins other member nations of the world that have raised their hands to improve the health of marine ecosystems, safeguard human health and livelihoods, and to protect marine animals from the harm that ghost gear represents. We believe that the establishment of a community of practice on ghost gear between Canada, the US, and Mexico could represent a worldwide example of regional coordination. Finally, Mexico, with all the other members of the high-level panel, would like to invite other countries to join us in this unprecedented action to make progress faster, just as Jane Lubchenco said. We recognize that there is no time to spare, and ladies and gentlemen, you can count on Mexico to do its part, and you can count on Mexico to continue this partnership for a very, very important initiative, because we have to take care of the oceans, and the oceans can be the solution to many of the challenges that we have ahead of us. So thank you very much again to all of you, and congratulations for this brilliant seminar in which we all learn so much.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you for your wonderful words, and thank you for the leadership that Mexico is showing and for your active contribution and involvement with the Ocean Panel. For all of you here, I want to thank you all for joining. It's been a wonderful seminar, wonderful launch here of the US, for the United States, of the Ocean Panel's transformations for a sustainable ocean economy. I'd like to thank Senator Sheldon Whitehouse as our keynote speaker. I'd like to thank the ambassadors who spoke and the ambassadors who co-hosted this event, the ambassadors from Norway, Australia, Canada, Chile, Jamaica, and Mexico. I'd like to thank all of our panelists for taking the time and for sharing their perspectives here. And I'd just like to close by stating again Jane's eloquent words at the end of her presentation, when she said that the ocean is not too big to fail and is not too big to fix, but it is too big and too central to the planet's future to ignore. So may we all go forward and do our part to help convert the Ocean Panel's transformations into reality in this coming decade, the most important decade for the ocean. Thank you very much. Thank you all. Go forth. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.